Hi. Today, as we talk about our intro to biochemistry, it's really important that we talk about water. At this point, you have seen my demonstration of some of the properties of water. So I'd like to go through some of the biochemistry of water quickly. I want you to take notes. You can stop as you need, and then you will take a quizzes, which the link is on Canvas, to test your knowledge. All right, the first thing is that we already know that water is H2O. So the H of water is, of course, hydrogen. Hydrogen is the simplest of all the elements. It has one proton, one electron. No neutrons, which is interesting, but it has an atomic number of one, which means one proton. That is its identity. And because it's a balanced atom, the positive charge in the nucleus is balanced by the negative charge of the electron. Oxygen is a little more complicated, as we talked about earlier. It has an atomic number of 8, so that means it has 8 protons, 8 neutrons in the nucleus, and then 8 electrons. The 2 in the first orbital shell, and then in the valence electron shell, which is the outermost, it has 6. So oxygen would really love to have 8 in its outer shell to complete it. If you remember, we have 2 in the first, 8 in the second, and 8 in the third. So oxygen is much more likely to gain 2 than it is to lose 6. So we say that oxygen is highly reactive. So the water molecule, this is how we draw it. It actually is sort of in this upside down shape. If we use what's called the ball model, red is always oxygen and white is always hydrogen. And here's another way of describing it. Now here you can see that hydrogen with its one little electron is here represented. The plus represents the proton. Here is another hydrogen with its little electron flowing around here. And then here are the 6 from oxygen. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Well, where are the other 2 from hydrogen? It's represented here by this plus, meaning it's added to oxygen. Okay. We say that water is polar, which means it has a positive end and a negative end. And the oxygen pulls more of the electrons from hydrogen closer to its atom than it allows for electrons to be closer to the hydrogen. So we say the oxygen end is more negative and the hydrogen end is more positive. Oxygen is more negative because there's usually more 8 protons, 8 electrons around the oxygen atom. But when you add the 2 from hydrogen, that gives it more negative particles. If there are more negatives around oxygen, that means there are less negatives around hydrogen, and something that's less negative is in relation positive. So that's why we say water is polar. So here you can see that hydrogen and oxygen here are sharing these 2. Hydrogen and oxygen here are sharing these 2. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, but 9, 10. Okay. Oxygen normally has 8. So there are actually 10 around oxygen, which makes it slightly negative. Because this one, that hydrogen is contributing to oxygen, is more than likely on this end, that leaves the one little proton there around hydrogen. So the negative end of one water molecule is attracted to the positive end of another. And whenever a positive hydrogen is attracted to another, to a positive, whenever a positive hydrogen is attracted to the negative end of another molecule, specifically water, it forms a bond. And that bond is called a hydrogen bond, which is easy to remember because hydrogen is forming the bond. Now, in and of itself, it's weak, but when you get a bunch of them together, it's very strong. Now, this covalent bond, I can't remember if we talked about that in our earlier lecture today, but covalent, co means sharing, which means hydrogen and oxygen are sharing electrons here. and here and here and here. But that covalent bonds happen within a molecule. Between molecules, especially if a hydrogen is involved, we form a hydrogen bond. So let's quickly go through the properties of water: cohesion, adhesion, less dense as a solid, and the universal solvent. So we've talked about some of these in my demo. So now we will see what these mean. So cohesion, here you can see, like I did in my demo, that paperclip floating on the water because it has surface tension. Cohesion is when there is attraction between particles of the same, okay? And because those water molecules are attracted to each other with hydrogen bonds, they all pull a little tighter together, like a tightly fitted sheet on a bed, okay? And that gives a surface strength, or what we call a surface tension. Adhesion is when there is attraction between two different substances, where hydrogen will bond with other surfaces, okay? So that's how water can be attracted to, let's say, paper. Paper, that's how you can use Bounty paper towels, the quicker picker-upper, right? Because the water is attracted to uh, the molecules in the paper and soaks it up. Now, an example of transpiration is where plants can take water from the soil and move them from the roots all the way up to the top of the tree. So here's a picture of that. These blue dots represent water going up the tiny tubes of wood in the plant. If we go up closer, we can see the hydrogen bonds in between each water molecule. And this is the xylem, the wood tissue. As they are connected to each other, that's cohesion, but the water molecules are also bonded to the xylem cell with adhesion, and that allows the water to go straight up the tree. Now, I'm going to not talk about this right now, but as I want you to stop and I want you to watch this video. Hopefully that'll work. If not, well, we'll figure it out. Okay, so here's a glass with ice floating in it. Who cares, right? Well, we care. Ice is less dense. That's why it can float. Now, water exists in 3 states of matter: solid, liquid, and gas. Ice is actually less dense than as a solid than it is as a liquid, which is very unusual in states of matter. You know what? I just had a brainstorm. I'm going to put that video link on Canvas just in case it doesn't work as you're watching this video. I don't know if you can watch a video in a video, but anyway, that's okay. I want you to watch it. So why do we care that ice is less dense? It makes a nice tinkling noise in our glass when we're drinking a glass of tea, but let's talk about it. Why is that a thing? Well, liquid water has the hydrogen bonds in between the molecules, and they're constantly being broken and formed and broken and formed. And that makes liquid, that's why when you spill a glass of water, it goes all over the place because the bonds are breaking, it's loose, okay? But frozen water, when the temperature goes down and those water molecules, aren't moving as fast, they become kind of frozen, if you will, in place, a little further apart than the molecules in the liquid. And so that makes this crystal-like lattice. I'll show you a picture in a minute. And that allows air to pass through. So here, which one is ice and which one is water? Well, I just told you the answer. Here you can see that there's a regular kind of a pattern here. And look, lo and behold, there are spaces, okay? So as the temperature decreases, the water molecules space themselves out a little further apart than when they're liquid. And clearly it can float because water can pass through. And why do we care? Well, this fish cares that lives in the Arctic Ocean because it can live under the ice. And that allows for life to continue. If the water froze as a solid, and if the solid was denser than the liquid, then the ice would form at the bottom of the ocean, eventually filling up the ocean with ice, and there would be no opportunity for life. Okay, the last thing I want to talk about is water as a universal solvent. A solvent is something that dissolves things, okay? Now, motor oil could be a solvent, but it's not a very good one because it doesn't dissolve much. But because water is polar, because it has a positive end and a negative end, it can pull apart substances and it can break them up into a solution. Think about it, going back to our example of our glass of tea, okay? In the glass, you're when you made the tea, you put sugar in there. Well, and then you put sugar in when the water was hot, the tea was brewing. So that water broke up those sugar molecules and you can no longer see them. Now, if you've ever done what I've done, which is you get a glass of unsweetened tea at a restaurant and then put some sugar in it, that's really stupid because the sugar doesn't dissolve very well. But that's just because the temperature of the cold tea is doesn't allow for the water molecules to move fast enough to dissolve it. But what do? I stir it really fast, and that gets the molecules of water moving faster, and they can bump into the molecules of sugar and break them up and dissolve that sugar. And life is possible on our planet because water is typically the solvent that creates all of the solutions that we need as human beings. Blood, and not just as us, but animals, even plants have sugar sap, right? That is dissolved in water. Oh, there we go. And so here's a solute, these blue crystals. Here's the water. Put the solute in the solvent and stir it up. And now you've got a solution. And that is important for regulation. Your blood needs to be at a certain um, uh, uh, what's the word I'm looking for? A certain uh, what am I look? I'm sorry. I should edit this, but I'm not going to. It needs to be at a certain concentration. That's the word I'm looking for, of water and minerals and proteins and red blood cells. If your blood gets too thin, because you are drinking too much water, that's a problem. If your blood gets too thick because you're not drinking enough water, then that's a problem too. So regulation is one of the R's of Sternger, and that helps keep us regulated. We sweat to keep our temperature regulated. We have urine to help to keep our blood regulated. We all of the solutions in our body. Okay. Last but not least, when solutions, when water is the solvent and there are solutes dissolved in them, we can measure what's called the pH. And the H of pH means how many hydrogen ions have been separated out of the water molecules and are building up in that solution. I'm not going to go into all of the chemistry of that. You will do that next year when you take chemistry. But a normal neutral solution is a 7. And there's a mathematical reason why, but just think about it for a minute. Just 7, that's a good number, right? So 7 is the middle. From 0 to 7, if it has a pH of 0 to 7, that is considered acidic. 0 would be like an acid that, would burn you the flesh right off your skull. I mean, really, that would be horrible. So a pH of 6 isn't that acidic. It's acidic, but it's not gonna, peel your skin off. From 7 to 14, we call that basic or alkaline. And that something that has a pH of 14 is as far from being acidic as possible. Now let's look at this picture. I got a picture in just a second. So every living solution that you have in your body has a different pH. And most are around neutral because that is what water is And that's what we want these solutions to be. But all of these solutions in our bodies also have something called a buffer. And a buffer, if the best way I can think about it is, a buffer is like a seesaw, or a balance, I guess. You want it to be even. You don't want too much weight on one side or too much weight on the other. If you've ever been on a teeter-totter or a seesaw, whatever you call it, with a kid that's bigger than you or littler than you, it's no fun, because the bigger kid sits on the ground the whole time and you're stuck up in the air. The little kid is flying up in the air and you're on the ground. You want someone of equal weight so you can go up and down and up and down. Well, the buffers prevent the up and down and up and down. They want to keep things even. So here's the pH scale. We said neutral is right here in the middle. That's 7. That is water. If we go down to the acid, I think that's hydrochloric acid down there. Now, you just don't want to deal with anything with an acid pH of 1. Lemons are pretty acidic. That's why you can't, eat a whole ton of them, because they'll really mess up your stomach. Vinegar has got a pretty low pH. Tomatoes have a pH of about 4. A lot of people can't eat like pizza or tomato sauce because it gives them indigestion. Well, what it does is it makes their stomach too acidic. And you have to take an antacid, which would be like, Pepto-Bismol or something, which can balance that back out. Bananas are pretty neutral. Potatoes are really neutral. Okay, now basic or alkaline, we got eggs, baking soda, soap is a little more alkaline, ammonia. Ooh, bleach. You can smell bleach a mile away, right? Oven cleaner. And then I think that's battery acid. Not battery acid. I can't think of what that is right now. I'll come back to it. So everything revolves around this neutral. If it's less than 7, it's acidic. If it's more than 7, it is alkaline. Okay, so that is my story about the properties of water. After you've watched this, go to the quizzes assignment. And once you've done that, you are done with your asynchronous learning for today. Thank you.